Did you think that Kashmir was always a Muslim majority region? That it never truly was a part of India? Then, my friend, you are very wrong. Let me tell you a story. There was a king who ruled not only India but also Central and South of Asia. There was a king who built temples in such an architectural style that even today's architects would bow their heads in shame. There was a king who was known as the Alexander of India and the second Samudragupta. His grandeur and elegance was such that his dynasty could not produce another gem like him. This king was called Lalitaditya Muktapida of Kashmir. He belonged to the Karkot dynasty and was one of the three brothers who ruled the kingdom in their lifetime. Lalitaditya was crowned as the king in 724 CE. During the same time, in Central Asia, the Arabs were rising their ultimate power by conquering the surrounding kingdoms and Islamizing them in a radical way. The empire of caliphs dominated Central Asia and North Africa. Silk trade was an important factor in the political affluence of the nations. Just before Lalitaditya's ascendance to the throne, the kingdom of Sindh fell into the Arabic hands. It was then ruled by a Brahmin named Chacha Rai. Next, the Arabs sighted Lalitaditya's Kashmir as their target. With his foot soldiers and cavalry, he swiftly defeated the Arab forces which were under the leadership of Junaid. And the Arabs never looked at Kashmir again. He consolidated Kashmir's influence over Kabul, Gandhar, Zabulistan, and Tokhristan. At the same time, Yashovarman was the ruler of Kannauj. When Tibet eyed central and eastern India, Lalitaditya and Yashovarman made their alliances with each other and defeated Tibetan forces. A total of 5 trade routes were freed from Tibetan rule after this defeat. Kashmiris celebrated the victory of Lalitaditya for centuries thereafter. As great of a conqueror as Lalitaditya was, he was also a master builder. His style of architecture was a mixture of Gandhar, Gupta, and Chinese forms, with a blend of Greek and Roman styles. He built many temples to his credit. They are presently in ruins, but their grandeur was unmatched at one time. The Martan temple at Martan was an example of this. The new capital was shifted to Parihaspur, translated as the City of Joy, which is presently a part of Baramulla district. There he constructed a huge palace for himself along with 4 temples of Parihaskesha, Muktakesha, Govardhan Dev, and Mahavaraha. When Lalitaditya set out for Digvijay, he conquered Kalinga, Bengal, Karnataka, even reaching to the south for Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka. On his way back, he took under his wing Konkan, Dwarka, Ujjain, Kathiawad, and returned to his capital in 744 CE. He also built many towns and structures including Sunishchitpur, Darpitapur, Falapur at the confluence of Jhelum and Sindh rivers. Lalitapur, Lokapunya, which is today's Lok Bhavan. He also built rope machines and water wheels, dams on the Jhelum to pump water to villages. His cabinet comprised of Pancha Mahashabda, which consisted of Mahapratiharapid, Mahasandhi Vigrahil, Mahashwashala, Mahabhandaragraha, Mahasadhana Bhaga. One of the funny things about the king was noted in his biography by Kalhana, in which he writes that the king, when he was under the influence of alcohol ordered his ministers that when he was intoxicated, they should not follow his orders. He set out on Uttarpit. At the same time, the Chinese dynasty, the Shang dynasty, was on the verge of decline. Citing this, Lalitaditya set out to conquer the vast areas of the Silk Route, including the deserts like the Gobi and Taklamakan Desert. And the general idea is this, that he probably did. Like his life, his death is also clouded by mystery, as he did not return from the Uttarpit. The legacy of Lalitaditya Muktapida of Kashmir should not only be lauded by all, but should be passed on from generations together. Because this was the king that brought together the Kashmir, its heritage, its politics, its spirituality, its intellect. He was the king who should not be forgotten.